Hey everyone, it's the Doom Dog. After two major lengthy critiques, including my longest one to date with Final Fantasy VII Remake, I decided that I would do something simpler for my final review of the year. We are reviewing another cable. Today we are taking a look at the Hyperkin HDMI cable for the SNES N64 and the GameCube. How is this cable, and does it live up to the standards set by the one that I reviewed for the PS1 and PS2? Let's take a look and find out. If you are like me, you are always looking for the best video output for your devices, but you are also potentially on a budget that may not allow for a more high-end solution, as those are usually rather expensive. This is where a company like Hyperkin steps in. Their cables seek to offer you a better result on a modern TV than the composite video that they were designed for. The big problem with hooking up 6th gen and earlier consoles to a modern TV is that they were not designed for it. With the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, you can easily get component cables that will look better, but good luck finding those for the GameCube. They do exist, but they are rare and expensive. Any generation before that, your best option in the States was composite, or maybe S-Video if you had a TV that would support it. The problem with composite is that it mixes the red, green, and blue video signals into one low-resolution mess. It looked fine on old CRT televisions, but its flaws become more apparent on modern TVs. Old tricks designed around the use of CRTs, such as dithering, become more apparent flaws and result in a picture that actually does look worse than you remember. Hooking up your console to modern TVs through composite is not ideal. You can mitigate some of the damage to the picture quality by simply switching the aspect ratio on your TV to 4:3 to get the picture to not look stretched out across the TV, but a solution that does display at an HD resolution would be preferable. This is exactly what you get with the Hyperkin HDMI cable. Because Nintendo had the same video out for 3 straight generations, it works for the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, and the GameCube, which is nice. So, what is included with the package then? Well, you get the cable itself and a USB cable. Much like the cable for the PlayStation 1 and 2, this does require a power source. It does not require a lot of power to use, however. If your console is plugged into your capture device, you can plug the cable into a USB slot on your PC, and that will work. It does not come with a USB wall plug, however, which is unfortunate. If you are going to plug it in that way, you need to supply that yourself. Luckily, they are not hard to come by. It still sucks, though. Just like the HDMI cable for the PlayStation and PlayStation 2, this has a switch on it that lets you select between 4:3 aspect ratio and 16:9. This seems almost entirely pointless. 2 of these 3 consoles were strictly 4:3 aspect ratio for literally all of its games. There are games on the GameCube that do support widescreen output, but they are less common than they were for the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 that supported this feature. If you happen to own some of these games, it's a nice feature to have. The only GameCube game that I own that supports it is Star Fox Adventures. When I was gathering gameplay for this, I wanted to get gameplay straight from a composite source. Unfortunately, one of my 2 composite capture devices will not work under Windows 10. Windows 10 will not even recognize it when it is plugged into my PC. The other one that I have does recognize, but the video stream cuts out every few seconds and it makes recording footage impossible. As such, I had to record gameplay footage through a composite to HDMI converter box. None of the gameplay that I show from a composite source is 100% accurate representation of what it actually looks like. With that in mind, let's get to the games for this comparison. Here is Final Fantasy VI, my favorite RPG of all time. In order to try to counterbalance the effect of this converter box, I thought I would try recording gameplay to a tape and recording that. That just made the game look worse than it should. Oh well. Still, you can see that the HDMI upscaling in the correct aspect ratio does not look bad at all. It does a decent job upscaling the image. It does make the audio quieter though, and this is something that carries out across all three consoles. After this experiment, I just used the composite to HDMI converter box at the lowest resolution possible, 480p, and converted the resulting video to the correct aspect ratio. I rendered the video at 640 by 480, trying to get as close to an authentic experience as I could. It is still not a 100% accurate representation of what it is supposed to look like, however, because my converter box is designed to clean up the composite video image. Keep that in mind as we move on. Here is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This is my favorite Zelda game. With this one, you can tell a definite difference as the color of the HDMI cable does appear to be a bit brighter than the standard composite is. The difference is fairly subtle, all things considered, but it is noticeable. Aside from that, I do think the HDMI does look a little sharper than the composite video does. Once again, it is a fairly subtle difference between the two. If you are playing casually, you may not see the difference, but to my eyes at least, the HDMI cable does look a little less blurry and a little more cleaned up. It is certainly not a major game changer like the PS1 and PS2 cable, but the difference is there. Now let's take a look at the game on the N64. This is Super Mario 64, an absolute classic from the launch of the system. Once again, there is a difference in coloring between the composite video and the HDMI video. The HDMI cable looks a little bit brighter. The color red in specific looks better on the HDMI cable, in my opinion. It is not a huge difference yet again, but I do think it looks a little more vibrant. As far as image clarity and sharpness goes, it's a Nintendo 64. There is only so much you can do with a low poly count early 3D machine like this. Without something like an emulator and a decent PC, there is nothing too much that you can do. I personally do not see much of a difference between the two cables, though I would imagine the HDMI one will hold up better on a modern TV. Here is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, everyone else's favorite Zelda game. This is the same story as the previous games in terms of on-screen color. The composite video cable looks darker than the HDMI cable does. The HDMI cable looks a tad bit brighter and more vibrant. Once again, the difference is not major between the standard composite and HDMI. As far as detail goes, it is basically the same story as Super Mario 64. There might be a slight difference between the two, but it is so minor that most people won't even see it. It is, of course, displayed at a more modern resolution, though, so it will help with playing your old games on a modern TV. This is Metroid Prime. This is one of the best games for the GameCube. The difference in color and brightness seems to be a little more pronounced here than it was on the Nintendo 64 and the Super Nintendo games that we looked at. For some reason or another, the HDMI cable is a fair bit brighter than the composite video, which makes it easier to see the details in the environment than it originally was. For this game, I would say that there is a more noticeable difference in image clarity as well, though I do not know how much of that is down to the HDMI cable being brighter than the composite video and that allowing you to see the environment better. Still, the detail that you can see here does seem to be a bit sharper on the HDMI cable than it is on the standard composite, as should be the case. Finally, here is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess for the GameCube. This is my favorite 3D Zelda game. As has been the case with every previous game, there is a difference in color as the HDMI cable looks brighter than the composite video does. It is less pronounced here than it was on Metroid Prime. This goes back to being more of a slight difference than anything else. Beyond this, there is little to no difference between the two. As far as image clarity, there is little difference here as well. There might be a slight difference due to the upscaling, but that is it. It would be difficult for the naked eye to see the difference between the two, but the HDMI cable does display at 720p. It still does have that advantage working for it over the composite video cable. You have no doubt noticed that this cable is not the major game changer that the one for the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 was. Well, there's a reason for that. That cable drew from the RGB video signal in the PlayStation 2 for its picture. This resulted in a more vibrant, significantly improved color on screen over even component cables. This, however, is just a composite video pass-through. What does this mean? It means it literally just takes the 480i composite video signal and outputs it through HDMI at 720p. That is literally all this cable does. It's simple. Its biggest advantage as such is that it makes it easier to record these old consoles on a modern capture device and to hook them up to modern TVs. The option to display your games at the correct aspect ratio is also nice. The thing of it is that there are better options. For the SNES, you can get a pair of HD Retrovision cables. These are component cables designed for the SNES specifically. It will give you a clearer and more crisp on-screen image with better color than this will. It will also run you more than twice as much as this, as they do sell for roughly $65 online. I said earlier that the GameCube had component cables and that they were rare and expensive. It's time to talk about why that is. Nintendo, being Nintendo, decided to pull the most Nintendo move ever and make the component video out on the GameCube be a proprietary slot on the back of the console. It's the only way to get component out on the system. You cannot do it through the standard video out slot. This allowed them to make sure no one else made component cables for the system, and it let them charge whatever they wanted. This did not go as Nintendo had hoped. The cables did not sell well, and they were discontinued rather quickly after that. There are not many in circulation as a result, and they are hard to find. You will pay a pretty penny for them if you find them. It also resulted in it taking forever for an HDMI adapter for the console that use the component slot. One does exist though, and it's called the GC HD. As you would imagine, drawing from the component out slot on the back of the GameCube results in a better picture with more vibrant color and improved image clarity over anything that you can get out of the standard composite slot. The GC HD is a much better solution than this, but it is also more expensive as it sells for $160 on Amazon. The Nintendo 64 is something of a unique beast, however. The video out on this console sucks. It has always sucked. The American version of this console did not have RGB to draw from at all, and your only options were composite and S-video. As such, getting good video out of this thing is extremely difficult, and the frequent solution seems to be modding an RGB board onto the motherboard and using that for HDMI. That is both costly and not easy for your average person. So, what advantage does this have then? Well, here's a side-by-side comparison of composite video versus HDMI cable on my 56-inch 4K television. I literally just pointed my camera at the screen and hit record for this comparison, so it's not perfectly ideal. I'm not entirely sure how else to do this in a better way though, so bear with me on this one. This should be good enough to serve my purposes for this review at least. By default, your TV will take your composite video source and display it in widescreen. That is the first thing you probably noticed. It can be fixed in the TV's menu typically, however. You can make it display at the correct aspect ratio. Beyond that, the image does hold up better on the HDMI cable than it does on the composite. Look at the text in specific here. Note that it is sharper and less blurry on the HDMI cable than it is on the composite one. This is the biggest advantage that the HDMI cable has. It holds up better on a modern display. I have to be honest here, I was expecting more from this cable after the PS1 and PS2 cable was rather impressive, but this didn't give me that. I was kind of disappointed by this. You do have better options out there than this cable, but none of them are as cheap as this one is. If all you want is an easy way to record your old consoles in high definition, this cable will give you that, but it doesn't really give you anything beyond that. If you are interested in this cable, I will leave a link below for you to check out. Thank you for watching and Merry Christmas everyone. If you could give this video a like and share it, that would help me out a lot. Leave your comments below. Do you have this cable? Are you planning on getting something like this cable? What do you think of it? Subscribe to see more and ring the bell to make sure you get notifications from my channel. Talk to you later, everyone. Doom Dog out.